What's up? It's Dr. Will James, Dr. Will James Podcast. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so that you get a notification every time I upload a new video. Today, we are looking at everything wrong with the system of education, part one. We are looking at evaluations. So that's what I want to dive into. Um, Many people know that my area of expertise, my doctorate is in educational leadership from St. John's University. I've been in education over a decade. And, the system of education really needs reform. If anyone in here is an educator, whether that be a para, teacher's aide, teacher, assistant principal, principal, dean, whatever you do within the system of education, you should realize the weaknesses and we should be moving towards the improvements. But let's look at these evaluations, okay? Let's look at this. So the main framework that is used for evaluations is the Danielson framework. All right, it was created by Charlotte Danielson in 1996, which is now 30 years ago. So it's broken up into four dimensions, right? And in that four dimensions, we have 22 components. So one is planning and preparation. Then you got classroom environment. Then you got instruction. And you got professional responsibilities. So I'm going to go down to one of the key major flaws that's in it before I break up, more of the flaws and major problems in it. It's in component 2. So right here, where it says managing classroom procedures, 2C, right? And I'm going to make that bigger. I want everyone to be able to see. So when teachers get rated, for non-teachers or people who are not in education, they get rated on this rubric, and they're either ineffective, developing, effective, or highly effective. So what you see here is unsatisfactory, which would be ineffective, basic, which would be developing, proficient would be effective, and distinguished would be highly effective, okay? So here we see where it says proficient, which will be effective in 2C, there is little loss of instructional time due to effective classroom routines and procedures. The teacher's management of instructional groups and transitions or handling of materials and supplies or both are consistently successful. With minimal guidance and prompting, students follow established classroom routines, and volunteers and paraprofessionals contribute to the class. So the major flaw right there is, and the problem that I have with parts of the Danielson and many different rubrics, is because it doesn't account for every environment, and it doesn't take into account the environment with what we see here. There's little instructional time due to effective classroom routines and procedures. The teacher's management of instructional groups and transitions or handling of both of materials and supplies or both are consistently successful with minimal guidance and prompting. So depending on the environment and the demographic where you're teaching, a teacher can easily be rated effective or highly effective, and it's really just based on the student body that they're teaching. So we have certain schools within the country that are high performance schools. These kids are headed to college, high socioeconomic status. The parents are engaged. They're engaged. They want to perform well. They want to do well. This is not taken into account. All of that information is not taken into account. Grade level. It's much easier to get a highly effective rating in high school, 12th graders, and it's like one of the highest academic schools in the country. It's easy to go in there and observe a teacher and get a highly effective rating because it wouldn't take much classroom procedures and routines for them to focus and be engaged, and you wouldn't have to manage as much. So this is what I'm saying. And I'm going to create my own framework. A lesson is either ineffective, effective, or highly effective, regardless of where you are. Is there a clear learning objective? Are there procedures in place? What I do agree with is clear classroom procedures and routines. Kids coming in and starting the do now or instant engage or whatever you call it. They have something to start the lesson. There's a beginning, middle, end to the lesson. And the end to a lesson can look differently. You know, sometimes you don't get to an exit ticket. Many of teachers can agree. Sometimes you just finish with students working independently. You don't always get to an exit ticket. Sometimes, you know, your kids finish working. They're working on work related to the learning objective, and the bell is about to ring, class is about to dismiss, and you say, okay, we got 2 minutes. You know, here's the homework for tonight. Pack up. That could be the ending of your lesson. That's your summary. It doesn't always have to be an exit ticket. Different times, different days, lessons look differently. And as long as the room is managed, kids aren't, you know, off the wall, and kids aren't, you know, trying to harm one another, trying to harm you. You have the class under control. You have clear structures, systems in place. Kids are working on materials, whether it be digital or hard copy. That is an effective lesson. You have questions to engage critical thinking, critical pedagogy. The vast majority of the class is engaged. They're raising their hand. They're trying to participate. And again, this depends on the location. So the way this is written, it allows a bias, because I've seen admin, when they favor a teacher, the way that teacher's room looks is rated effective. But another teacher can have the same exact look, the same exact lesson, and it be called developing. They nitpick it. When the way this is written, it doesn't take into account student body. So the administrators need to take into account student body. If you walk into a room and you know that there are, out of 30 students, you know, 15 are L's, you got a whole bunch of SWDs, that's student with disabilities, IEPs are in the room, and, you know, it's a lot more differentiation that has to take place. It's much more difficult to get a highly effective rating with all of those variables. But if you go into a room sometime, and it could be an 8th grade class, and you got over 50% of the class on a 5th grade level. Those who teach in New York City, you know what I'm talking about. So when you have that to deal with, that to battle, it's much more difficult to get the effective or highly effective with the engagement and certain things. But if the teacher is pushing it and the teacher is working with what they have to work with and challenging those students and clearly getting to a learning objective, clearly trying to obtain learning, it doesn't always have to be one specific way. These rubrics make it to where teachers have to teach one specific way. That's what I don't like. I think there are multiple ways to get to results, and there's not enough emphasis placed on how you get to the results. They want one specific way to get to the results. So I'll switch it up. Do I want to go down? Let me see while we're still here, because I'm going to switch it up and get into some data too. I want to look at the threes, because that too, they place the most emphasis on component 3. So wait, let's look at that. Managing student behavior. In order for students to be able to engage deeply with content, the classroom environment must be orderly, businesslike, and productive without being authoritarian. So again, like I was just saying, depending on the environment you're in, kids come in. I've taught in different schools. Certain schools it's easier than others. Kids come in, they just sit down, get to work. And it's like 99% of the class like that. Depending on what school you're at, and this is another thing, these rubrics have to take into account the system and the structures that the school has put in place. What is the school culture like? These should put some emphasis, some pressure on administrators within a building. All right. Do the admin allow teachers to have autonomy in the classrooms to structure the room they want to? Some schools, they require, the admin will say, oh, you got to have your rooms set up this way. So that right there is taken away from the teacher's ability to manage their classroom and run their lessons a certain way. If you tell me I have to structure my room a certain way, if I want to put them in rows and you saying I have to put them in groups and circles, that's taken away. If I want to put them in groups and circles and you say I got to put them in rows, that's taken away. If I want to, one side being a circle, one side being rows, however I want to set it up, I should be allowed to set it up the way I want to set it up. I should have the autonomy to set it up the way that's going to allow me to best manage it, because I know the kids. I know how I want my class to function. But yeah, it should put more pressure on them, because a lot of schools have a structure where there's no discipline, and then it makes it more difficult to manage the class because kids know that they won't get in trouble for anything. You're managing the classroom, you have a system, you have a structure, you have a guideline, a send out process, a referral process, to where you follow 3 to 5 steps before you send the kid out. You may give the kid a break. You may move their seat. You may do a nonverbal. You may do a verbal. You may do a check-in one-on-one. You may do all of that before sending a kid out. Then you sit a kid out, and 2 minutes later, they're back in your room. So the kids know that there's no punishment in certain schools. There's no what they call a ISS room, or there's no dean's office, or you can't go to the principal's office. They know there's no send-out policy. So that should be taken into consideration when we talk about managing and things like that. Again, it depends on an environment. So this means that you could take a teacher who's highly effective in one environment with this, because it's easy based on the culture of the school and the student body of the school, and then place them in another environment and they could be ineffective, or they would be called developing. So this should just be what systems are in place in the school as well that allows teachers to focus and thrive within the classroom. Let's go down to the 3s. Managing student behavior. So this is all 2 is, remember we said classroom setup. Students' behavior is generally appropriate. The teacher monitors student behavior against established standards of conduct. Teacher response to student misbehavior is consistent, proportionate, and respectful to students, and is effective. Again, this is going to depend on the students, though. They expect teachers to work magic with some of the most disorderly students. It depends on what does the home setup look like. If a student basically takes care of themselves, they may be being raised by an aunt or uncle or a grandparent, and that grandparent may or may not speak English, which throws off parent to teacher communication. There's no one to hold them accountable at home. It's going to be a lot more difficult to manage that student if they choose to misbehave than if you have a student from a 2-parent household. They high socioeconomic status, they care about their future, they want to be successful, both parents speak English, the parents contact with you and keep an open line of communication. It's much different when you have the majority of the latter versus what I first mentioned. So to rate a teacher ineffective or unsatisfactory or basic or developing because of that is where, like, I see a flaw in this. I think if they have a system in place, structures in place, they apply certain measures and teacher tools to try to manage behavior, and because of the lack of support from administrators, it's difficult. You can't then place it on a rubric for a teacher. Now, if a teacher's just doing nothing, saying nothing, there's no systems in place, that's a different story. But you also, like I said, administrators, when they're doing these reflections, they should know like what the students' home life looks like, what the setup looks like. A lot of these students don't even respect administrators. Respect administrators. So how can you then give a teacher ineffective or a low rating in this area when they don't even respect administrators because they know they don't get a consequence? Again, organizing physical space. How can you organize in physical space? The classroom is safe and students have equal access to learning activities. The teacher ensures that the furniture arrangement is appropriate. A lot of schools, like I said, a lot of schools, the administrators determine how the physical space is set up. So if the physical space has to be set up a certain way, you're now taking away a component from a teacher. And then you're going to go in and rate the teacher based off this. Is this automatically highly effective? That should be left up to teachers how they set their room up. Another reason I don't like about these rubrics, it makes you, like I said, it forces you to rush your lesson. You may be asking students questions, but you know that you got to check off all of these boxes. So you rush through your lesson. See, this is what I'm talking about. They want the lesson to have a beginning, middle, and end that looks a certain way. They want to be able to, every day, you got to have an exit ticket or something like that so you're now, if you're teaching your lesson and there's a great discussion, kids are thinking critically, they're talking to one another, there's higher order thinking, questioning you, questioning each other. But you did that for 25 minutes or 20 minutes, and now you must move on when that could be the lesson. And some days that's just going to take place. How can you say that's not an effective lesson if kids are engaged, talking to one another, the class is under control, that higher order thinking, and then you could just have them produce material centered around that. But if that's the majority of the class having a discussion, they will say that there was no ending to it, or I didn't see enough work being produced in the time. When you could have them take that information from the discussion and do a homework assignment, and then continue that the following day. There's just so many things that's just wrong. So here's more data on the problems with evaluations. It says study teacher evaluation reforms failed to improve student outcomes. This is from February 8th, 2022. So 4 years ago. And there's several studies like this that prove this. This is one of the findings from a new study co-authored by UNC School of Education researcher Matthew Springer, PhD, published in December as working paper by the Annenberg Institute at Brown University. So there was a study at Brown University that found that teacher evaluation reforms do not improve student outcomes. So this is the problem. You got a lot of teachers who are evaluated with these forms, and it doesn't improve student outcomes. The whole point of education is to get student growth, student outcomes improving. There's several studies that show teachers being rated, developing, and getting the same results as teachers who are rated effective or highly effective, which makes no sense. If the rating is different, the results should be different, but they're not, which just shows the major flaw. And this is one of the major problems in the education system. The data shows, these data show that on average across the country, teacher evaluation reforms haven't had their intended effect, said Springer, the Robina and Walter E. Hussman Jr., Distinguished Professor of Education Reform. We found that while linking teacher evaluations to student performance has worked in a few places, it has proved to be very difficult for most school districts to establish these systems in ways that contribute to better academic outcomes for students. So before the reforms, teacher evaluations relied primarily on observations, had little direct connection to teacher compensation or employment, and so nearly all teachers receiving satisfactory ratings, leaving no way to differentiate among the teachers' performances, researchers have documented. Reform proponents advocated that teacher evaluation systems that take into account student performance would make it possible for school districts to reward effective teachers while also identifying lower performing teachers in need of professional development or to be removed from their jobs. This incentivized the federal government. And so this data was collected from 2009 to 2017 throughout 44 states and the District of Columbia. They implemented reforms and aimed at evaluations of teachers. A team of researchers, Springer and colleagues from Michigan State University, Brown University, and the University of Connecticut, set out to analyze the effects of the reforms. And they measured the performance from 2009 to 2018. They found that the reforms didn't work. So they only found that it worked in a few districts out of all of the districts they went to. So this is just showing that it's nonsense and it doesn't work. This is why, and they know this. So this is what kills me when schools talk about being data driven and they're not data driven in all aspects. Because if you see that evaluation frameworks aren't working, especially like the Danielson, according to data, why wouldn't you then just use that data? Let's look at another source. And I hope you all the educators, or if you know an educator, you share this with them. So here's another one from 2016. The U.S. Department of Education Statistics, Research and Evaluation, the Institute of Education Sciences, recently released a study about the validity of the Danielson framework. Observational ratings used. So they reviewed 713 teachers. In this study, researchers found that principals did not discriminate as much among the individual 4 constructs and 22 components. Analysis support the use of the overall scale versus the subcomponents. In addition, principals also rarely identify teachers as minimally effective or ineffective, with approximately 10% of ratings falling into these of the lowest 2 of the 4 categories on the Danielson scale. This was also true across all but one of the 22 aforementioned Danielson components. So only 10% of teachers got ineffective or developing. 90% are effective or highly effective. So why aren't the results highly effective or effective? Why don't we have 90% of students passing in these school districts? Why don't we have 90% of them performing on grade level on these various assessments if they get an observation of effective or highly effective. What is the metric? Shouldn't it be student performance? Shouldn't it be student growth? That alone should be the metric to rate someone effective or not. If I'm able to grow students 25, 30%, 35%, that right there, we should put a percentage on it. This amount of kids came into your class not knowing anything. Then they knew this at the end of the year, as displayed by such and such assessment. And you could have one at the beginning of the year. They should have the same assessment at the beginning of the year, same one at the middle, same one at the end, based on whatever the subject area is and the grade level. And then that way you can prove what you've taught them. And the percentage should determine if someone's effective, highly effective, or ineffective. If none of your students grew or 10% grew, you're ineffective. If 50% grew, that's a lot. If you have 100 students and say 0 of them could pass the exam at the beginning of the year, and then at the end 50 pass, I would say that's a highly effective rating, or at least effective. And then if your percentage is over 50%, then that means the majority of kids grew. You have to get a highly effective rating. This is the way to do it. But this data shows the issues. So this source, teacher observations have been a waste of time and money. So fundamental information that is the basis of evaluating the performance of our K-12 education system is sending different signals. Measures of student achievement point to low levels and meager improvement. Measures of teaching indicate nearly every teacher is effective, but teachers are the most important input to learning. Something's amiss. So this is what I just said. How are the vast majority, almost everybody is effective, but teachers are the most important part of that, and not the students' data aren't, the majority of students aren't effective. They're not passing or showing improvement. The same percentage of teachers that we're saying are effective, we should get those same results. So it says achievement is not high and not improving. Recent data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress show that most of America's 4th, 8th, and 12th grade students are not proficient in math and reading. Results from testing in 2015 showed that 60% of 4th graders, 57% of 8th graders, and 75% of 12th graders are not proficient in math. 60% of 4th graders, 57% of 8th graders, and 75% of 12th graders are not proficient in math. That means only 25% of 12th graders were proficient in math. I guarantee you the percentage of math teachers who got a proficient rating far greater than 25%. Far greater than 25%. Only 25 were proficient. The number is far greater than that. For 4th graders, it's only 40% proficient. And for 8th graders, only 43%. I guarantee you all the percentage of effective teachers for math is higher than between 25 and 43%. It's probably at 70%. Let me see if they name it. Nor are they close to being proficient. For example, 37% of 12th graders scored at the basic level of proficiency and 38% scored below the basic level. So what are we talking about? 37% of 12th graders scored at the basic level, and 38% scored below the basic level, which would be ineffective, the lowest level. Not much has changed in the last decade. The first figure shows the average 17-year-old scoring 150 in math in 2005 and 152 in 2015. So they went up two points from 2005 to 2015. Still in between basic and proficient. Proficient is 175. And from 05 to 2015, we went from 150, peaking at 153, down to 152 as the average over a decade while they're implementing these observations. Measures of teacher effectiveness vary state by state, but results are consistent. Nearly every teacher is effective. A number of states implemented new teacher evaluation systems in the last 10 years, and there is still a widget effect. In Florida, 98% of teachers are effective. New York, 95%. Tennessee, 98%. Michigan, 98%. Look at these percentages. Look at the data we just saw, and now look at these percentages. This is the problem. This shows that why these should be thrown out and need to be reevaluated. This just proved my point. This just proved my point. This is why I'm done with these, and so many teachers are annoyed with these evaluations. You got 98% of teachers in New York and Florida being rated effective. Florida's like the lowest, between like Florida and Mississippi, those are like the lowest educational performance states. But so many teachers are rated effective. There's some problem there. This is the problem with the exams and the data, or the way they're collecting data, or there's a problem with the way they're evaluating teachers, or there's a problem with the teachers. It's as some has to be a problem. The data is not adding up. There should be a correlation. There should be a correlation to the way students perform and the way teachers are rated. The way teachers teach and the results, the outcomes. So y'all can let me know what y'all think in the comments. That's part one of everything wrong with the education system in America. Part one is these evaluations. The data doesn't add up. It's not the best way to critique teachers. I think it's too vague and ambiguous. We need to put percentages on it. Schools should have ways to be more objective about it so that the information can line up. If you don't have the vast majority of your kids if you don't get the vast majority of your kids to grow, you can't get a certain rating. Also, we have to put administrators in this. We have to put the school culture in this. We have to put different, I think it should be an equity scale, because we know that household impacts student performance, income impacts student performance, race impacts data or where students are located. There's so many variables that have to be taken into consideration. Is this low socioeconomic status community? Is this single parent households? All of that needs to be taken into account. If we have the data on how that impacts students, the violence in the communities, all of that needs to be taken into account. All of that impacts student performance. So then if you're able to get students to grow at a certain rate within that community, if you get students to grow 30% in Compton, that's different than getting 30% of students to grow in Beverly Hills. You get what I'm saying? One of those are easier. Those are not the same two types of teachers. The one in Compton, I would easily argue, is the more effective teacher. They have to battle more hurdles to get to that growth percentage. You understand? You can't simply look and say 30% growth, same type of teacher when they're in two different schools. So that's the problem with a lot of this data. That's the problem with a lot of these rubrics. That's the problem with the Danielson framework. It doesn't take into consideration the many variables that different teachers will have to battle. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments. Let me know the next topic y'all want me to address. Let me know what y'all think about these evaluations. Peace.